Hey everybody, welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. I'm your host, Mike Malatesta. I'm an entrepreneur who's founded and led 2 8-figure companies. I'm also an investor, author, speaker, and lifetime learner. On this podcast, I explore stories of success in every episode and with every guest. What it means, why it's important, and of course, how it happens. You can subscribe, connect, and learn more about me at mikemalatesta.com. Today I'm fulfilling my promise to you with another amazing success story. Lalit Mangal joins us on the podcast. Lalit is the founder and CEO of Airmeet, a virtual event platform for virtual summits and workshops. It's a very souped up Zoom. That's how I look at it. We talk about how his parents found out about him starting Airmeet when they read about it in a newspaper story. They wanted his career to go in a different direction, so he had kept that from them. And how he's betting big on what he believes is the fundamental shift to remote work. He describes the computer as a humble friend that follows all your instructions. I got a kick out of that. Here we go with Lalit Mangal. Lalit, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Mike. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this because what you're going to learn about today, by the way, is we've got a phenomenal entrepreneur from India with us today who's been involved in multiple companies. And his latest, as you heard in the introduction, Airmeet, is something you're going to all be familiar with, kind of, because for the last year and plus, most of us has been doing all of our meetings and conferencing to the extent we were doing them on a video platform like Zoom, for example. And we're all used to that, or as used to it as you can be when you put aside the fact that you're not actually engaging with people, live like you're used to. And Lalit's current company, Airmeet, is doing something really special with video conferencing that you may not have ever seen before. So it's going to be really interesting to learn about him and to learn about that as well. Lalit, I start every podcast with the same simple question. How did it happen for you?
Sure, Mike. Yeah, and that's always a good question to answer, right? And so for Airmeet, so let me take you back to 2016, right? Like 5 years ago, and it was 2016, and I just sort of wrapped up my previous company, which was into real estate, and I was sort of involved with the acquiring company in handovers, etc. And then in Bangalore, there was this World Startup Expo that was happening. It was a 3-day event. It was happening in a very large venue. Uh, Close to 500 startups from all over India and maybe Southeast Asia were present. And then each of these startups were given one small desk, and maybe founders were supposed to stand there for all these 3 days and give the same pitch to everybody who's coming and visiting, right? So that event, so me trying to attend that event, it was at least 2 hours for me to drive to that event, and then I spent close to 4 or 5 hours in that venue. Could not meet all the startups, probably 20 or 30, and then my interaction with those startups, one thing was very evident, that those people have drained out all of their energy by just standing and reciting the same pitch again and again and again, right? So that moment was somewhere the genesis of the idea of Airmeet, right? Because in 2016 also, that felt like a very archaic and a very old way to connect to people, right? People who are interested in investing and people who are looking for funds, right? So it sort of stayed with me, but I did not act on it in that moment. But then after my break, started to came to my desk in 2019 again, and started exploring ideas. And this time I deliberately wanted to build a remote company, right? Because in my previous company, I'd built a large tech organization and spent a lot of time hiring and managing a tech team. I always wanted to build a remote company. And this time I thought, why not just start with building a remote company? Did not know which problem I would solve. Me and my current co-founders luckily we're all 3 in different cities, and we decided, let's collaborate over video conferencing and start exploring what are the problems of a remote company, right? And so in our research of finding a problem, we wanted to meet more remote companies like us, right? Where who have adopted remote work, and what challenges are they facing? How are they managing recruitment? How are they managing payroll? How are they managing compliance with respect to, let's say, in India at least, there is a lot of compliance if you don't have a physical office, etc. Right? So we wanted to, just casually catch up a network, which typically happens during a meetup or a conference, right? If you're pursuing anything which is mainstream, let's say marketing or product management, and if you're living in a mainstream city, right, or a major city, you would definitely find over a weekend or at least once a month there will be some of the other meetup that is happening, which would put you in touch with other folks that would bring you up to speed with what's happening in the domain, right? For us in India in 2019, nobody was pursuing remote work. We were probably the odd ones out, and we wanted to find whether there are meetups happening around us wherever we are about remote work, and none, absolutely none, was happening in India, especially in the cities where we were in. Most of the action around future of work was happening in the valley, right? And that was very ironic, right? And we were almost contemplating to book a flight ticket and buy a ticket to a conference which was supposed to happen in the valley around about future of work. And again, at that moment, the same genesis that was that idea that took seed a couple of years ago is sort of forming up again, that events should be treated in a much more modern outlook, right? The whole old thought process of getting people under one roof, bearing the cost of transportation, and all of that has to change now, because all of us are now part of global. All of us now carry some sort of a global identity, right? And all of us are now we have networks and circles, and I would say reasons for us to be even more active in the global I would say sphere of influence than earlier, right? So the whole idea of making your presence available to the larger network or larger stakeholder ecosystem should be relooked at, right? So that was the starting I would say something that got us started on this problem of remote meetups and events. And we decided it was kind of August of 2019 that we will start working on this problem, right? And November 2019 is when we did our first meetup of sorts, right? And all the while we were using tools like Zoom, etc., to see if existing technology is good enough for conducting remote meetups, right? Because we did not want to reinvent the wheel, right? So, and we conducted a lot of event meetups using traditional tools like Zoom, etc. And then we quickly realized that the thought process with which Zoom was built was not a meetup, right? It was basically to bring people in a conversation and then get over with. Or we also explored Zoom webinar and a lot of other webinar solutions, and over there what we felt was the whole opportunity of unlocking value that you have, which is there by the sheer presence of people at your webinar, right? People who are watching a webinar are a lot more than just a count, right? And webinar solutions were just treating them as a count of people who are watching it right now. We wanted to want to create like an event experience, and at an event, right, there is a lot of free flow conversation that happen, right? And there are a lot of social interactions that many times create memorable experiences and very, very valuable connections. So what we decided as our minimal viable product would be to just add some sort of a different waiting experience, right? So every webinar even today has some sort of a waiting experience, like for example at 5 p.m. if you're about to start a webinar, and someone who logs in at exactly 5, or let's say slightly before, they would just see a blank screen, right? There's a host is yet to start a webinar. And we thought, why not just transform that waiting screen into a networking screen? Why not just bring something so natural, so intuitive, like a virtual table, right? Because in a physical world, when you arrive at a venue, you do recognize there is a seating arrangement, and you get yourself seated, and then that's how someone can grab a seat at the same table, and then some conversation can get sparked. So that was a very basic exploration of an MVP that we did, and we got some really good traction, and we got really good validation, especially in the community manager segment, right? Folks who are managing a community. And they just became good promoters of the product, and that was the starting of our journey, right? And that's in a nutshell how it happened. And let me just also spend some time on the journey forward. So we were not even in a wildest dream or hoping for or even imagining a pandemic of this scale, right? But then when it hit, there was a lot of spotlight that came to Airmeet and other products like Airmeet, and then we had to be ready for, I would say, global scale conferences, while we were like a futuristic product trying to attack meetups only and community meetups, right? But then we had to quickly sort of add features and capabilities which would then be suitable for global conferences, right? So we grew under the influence of pandemic, and now we are a global company, and we have customers, like top customers, and we were doing close to 4,000 events per month, and close to 2 million attendees come to Airmeet on a monthly basis, right?
So, okay, let me back up a little bit. You said a bunch of stuff there, and I want to make sure I get some of. First of all, when you referred to the Valley, you meant Silicon Valley. Is that correct? When you were talking about,
Yes.
Okay, okay, I just wanted to make sure. And that first startup conference that you mentioned you went to in 2016, that sounded like a traditional trade show type, what I would consider a trade show type environment. And is that? Do I have the right picture there? And you did not go except to experience it, correct?
You
Yeah,
weren't
it was a,
presenting.
it was a, I was not presenting. I was
Okay.
I was a visitor, and the name itself was World Startup Expo.
Okay, World Startup Expo. Yes, but it sounded like that was the format for it was traditional trade show-ish, like where people had booths and people would come up and right. So it was yeah. Okay, and then your co-founders. You mentioned that you teamed up with two co-founders. Were these people you knew? How did you find them and start sort of figuring out that these two would be, people that started the conversation around Airmeet, or really the conversation around how you could build a remote company is what it sounded like, right? So were these people you worked with before, Lalit, or how did they come into the picture with you?
Yep. So both my current co-founders, Manoj and Vinay, I've had really great working experience with them in my previous startup. Manoj was the head of operations at that company, and Vinay was a director of engineering at that company, right? So we had
Okay.
really good mutual respect, very high mutual respect, and we always, kept touch. During my break as well, we kept meeting and bouncing off ideas, and I had already decided that my next company, I would pick, these two people as my co-founders.
Okay, got it. And let's go and explore your former company, or two. I think at least two. I've got Unacademy and Common Floor, and I think you mentioned Common Floor, which is well, I'll let you explain what it is. But how did those come into being? And I guess I want to get an understanding of how you made it to the point where you could even consider something like Airmeet, for example.
Sure. So Unacademy is not my startup. I was an angel investor in Unacademy.
Okay.
My only other startup which I did before Airmeet was Common Floor, and that is a real estate classifieds search engine. And yeah, so the genesis of that was, again, trying to solve my own problem. And I'm a techie by by my personality as well, right? Uh, so I was in that startup. I was involved building the product, and building the product org, right? And having worked with technology teams in close quarters, and having built technology systems, I did see the potential of working remotely, because we've during that time frame, we had to let go of so many really talented people just because they were in a different city, right? So they would apply for our company, but then they cannot move to where we were located, and then we had to let go of those opportunities. So always wanted to explore this distributed way of working, where the focus is only on output and productivity, and there is a lot less wastage of time in commute, and a lot less wastage of time in I would say other dynamics that happen at an office. Yeah.
Okay. And what did Common Floor end up becoming? So was it where did the idea come from? You said it was sort of solving your own problem, which is often where I see entrepreneurs companies come from, solving a problem that they have or recognize. But how did that happen for you?
Yeah. So in India, I think the real estate sector wasn't very regulated until very recently, and there was a lot of, I would say, challenges in just finding an apartment to rent or to buy, right? And the biggest problem is, uh, there are a lot of fly-by-night builders and fly-by-night real estate brokers, right? So you can't really trust them, right? And a lot of fake information around properties, and so the online search experience for properties is even more painful. It actually makes your the real estate journey even more hassle prone and painful, right? So we wanted to basically bring some structure to that. So the problem was, like, we were looking for an apartment to rent, and we were not able to find that. And
Mhm.
in back in the day, every apartment building would have some sort of an internal communication email group of sorts, right? Today everybody is on WhatsApp groups or maybe Slack communities. But then back in, this is like 2008 time zone, right? So
Okay.
I was with Common Floor as a co-founder for 9 years, right? So we started in 2008, and before that I was working at Oracle, and I was looking to switch apartments, right? Because when I landed up in Bangalore, I joined few of my friends as flatmates. So I did not go through the property hunt as such, right? So there was a friend of mine who was staying at an apartment, and I just landed up in his apartment and started staying with him. But then he had to migrate to some other city, and then it was the first time that I was doing a search for my own residence, right? So, and that is when that is when we and myself and my other co-founders back in time, we faced the challenges of how broken the property search journey was in India, right? Back in those times. So we wanted to put some structure. We wanted to, we brought about a catalog approach, right? For example, in India, apartments are a big deal, right? Because it's a very densely populated country, and apartment is the preferred residential unit of sorts, right? So every a middle income family would prefer to live in an apartment, right? And typically, a lot of information about the unit that you want to finalize, it is quite common, about this. Mostly the decision is about, this is the apartment building, and in this building this one is available, right? So we sort of created a catalog of all apartment buildings in India, and then you could just quickly, slice and dice. Maybe you can apply a filter of, I want apartment buildings which are in 1 kilometer radius from this landmark and should be having a swimming pool and all of that. We just build a catalog, and then that sort of brought a lot of order to the chaos of property search. That was the genesis of that company.
Okay. So is it similar to, can I think about like Zillow for homes? Is it similar to that?
Much like Trulia. Yeah.
Yeah,
The
okay.
philosophy was similar to Trulia.
Okay, got it. And you said you were a techie, and that makes me want to ask about more of like your origins growing up. I mean, is that something that was just in you from an early age, or something that developed, or was it a family thing, or what? Tell me about growing up in your family.
Yeah. So the peculiar thing about India is that almost every I would say decently good student is forced to become an engineer, right? Because or either an engineer or a doctor.
Or a doctor.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So because it's an emerging economy, and there's a lot of I would say family expectation around, let's say, kids to sort of to pick a predictable career path, and engineering, and as well as becoming a doctor is a lot more predictable, right? So uh, that definitely did influence my choice as well. But then what I particularly like about computer science is that, again, this whole domain is a lot more, I would say, in your control, right? There are no uncertainties, there are no whims and fancies, right? So a program, if it is not behaving in the right way, if there is a bug in your software, it's totally your fault. A computer is such a humble companion that it would follow all your instructions, right? So that sort of made me fall in love with computers, and I just liked building products which I would want to use, right? So in my own free time, when I was in college, I would just ideate on products that should exist, right? So in my final year of college, I was also helping my university build and manage their website, official website. I was part of a student group which would take that responsibility. And we whatever challenges that I would face, for example, we were looking for stock images, right? And I somehow had the idea that there should be a crowdsourced marketplace where people can upload their photos, and then people who are looking for stock photos should be able to buy that. And I did not know that that's a huge market and there's a huge potential, and there's a lot of other companies built around it, right? So kind of, ideas keep popping up in my head, and I keep, in lack of a better word, I keep romanticizing with ideas. Sometimes I pursue those to some extent, but then it has to be really compelling for me to, just get started. So my previous startup was one such compelling incident where it just got me started, and then this time Airmeet was again that one compelling idea that got me started.
Okay, that was amazing what you said. A computer is a humble companion. It follows all of your instructions. So that was amazing. That was something worth writing down. That's a great quote, because one, you cut right to the chase. A computer does what you ask it to do, right, or what you tell it to do. But it also flies in the face of what so many other people who don't have the same mindset as you. It's like, the computer is always messing with you. It's like the computer's not your companion; it's your nemesis, maybe. So thank you for sharing that. I wrote that down. I'm going to use that. Were your parents then? What did they think when you decided to leave? You got a good job at Oracle. It sounds like right out of school. That sounds safe and like on the right path. And then you decided to, do this startup. Was that okay, or was that? How was that perceived?
Yeah, so I did test waters by, sort of painting a story of a friend who did, leave the company, and I got very, I would say, unfriendly responses, right? My parents were not very supportive of my friend's decision, quote unquote, right?
Yeah, I like it.
So I then decided to not even reveal to my parents that I've decided to start a company. And then at least 2 months into my journey, I did not even reveal that. I would just, in fact, I was not living with my parents, but then in all my regular encounters with them on phone or in, over video chats, etc., it would always be about, office is good, everything is fine. And my parents got to know when one of the leading newspapers, Economic Times in India, they covered my startup as one of the innovative startups, right? So me and my co-founder, was sort of featured on the ET startup section, and that is when my parents got to know that, I've sort of quit my job and I'm pursuing something. So then they were less, less angry. They did appreciate that I'm doing something worth pursuing, but then they did warn me around the risk of it, and they did, did their due, the duty of at least guiding me that do have a timeline or a deadline by which this has to materialize into something. Yeah.
Okay, so that's an interesting strategy. You sort of floated it out as, a friend of mine, and sort of wait for the advice, and then you did it and didn't tell them. But it sounds like the article in the newspaper, sort of provided validation, like, hey, maybe the kid's got a good idea here, and yeah, I like it.
Absolutely, yeah.
So in 2019, when you and your co-founders were, having these discussions, what was the thing? Was there one thing, or was it a series of things that convinced you that that Airmeet was an idea that needed to come to the marketplace? Was there one thing, or was there a series of things where you were finally convinced? Because you had to go on and of course you didn't know about the pandemic at the time, so you had already seen, you were betting that pandemic or not, this was going to be a movement. And of course, Zoom's been in the marketplace for a long time, and others, WebEx and some others for regular sort of, video meetings. But you sort of took the idea, further. So what? Yeah. Was there?
So I think so. We were just betting on some fundamental trends, right? So we looked at this problem from a first principle approach, right? What are the risks around it, right? And what are the fundamental assumptions? And then we just validated each of those assumptions, right? So one of the things that we were betting on is that video is now a preferred mode of information consumption, right? And we were looking at how video consumption, especially in the non-entertainment category, is increasing, right? So I did my own research on tutorials, right? So in the previous decade, which is the 2000 to 2010, there were a lot of tutorials which were written as blogs, in textual tutorials, right? Look how to do something. There was a textual tutorial around it, right? But that entire category shifted to YouTube, right? Today, people actually search on YouTube around how to do stuff, how to, let's say, write this software, how to achieve something in this software. And so that was when absolutely clear that, video is the fundamental medium now of information consumption and learning, right? The second big trend that was, which was also undeniable, was that people prefer remote work, and the jump in the number of people who are choosing remote, right? That was actually very, very encouraging, right? So year over year, close to 35% jump, right? Since 2012, there was a data that I was looking at. Since 2012, there was a 35% year-on-year jump in number of people who have switched to fully remote, right? And in my own research, I came across people who were like a fully remote company, like 12 people company, fully remote, and they only meet, let's say, once a year. Then I also came across fully remote venture funds, fully remote accelerators, and these were the pioneers, right, or the innovators of the sorts, right, who were pursuing it despite all the challenges, right? Despite tools being inadequate, they're just pursuing just because it makes sense from cost, or it makes, or there's no other way to achieve what they're trying to do, because maybe a certain project has collaborators which are so far apart that only remote works, right? So when I saw that that stuff is already happening in remote, and there is a significant jump in that believers in remote work. So, and if I projected that trend forward, right, when remote work becomes mainstream, then people would definitely want to move out of their urban residences, right? So for example, people would want to live in their favorite city. Why would they want to live in, let's say, a very crowded city if it was not for work, right? If work is remote, then I would definitely go and live in the mountains or live at the beach, right? And what would then happen is that the your stakeholder ecosystem, whether it is your internal employees or your customers or your executives, right? So you will start to see more and more people, moving out, or being not being in the main city that you are focused on. For example, let's say if there was a company which was in San Francisco, and in 2015, maybe all their top 100 customers would be in 40-mile radius, but post remote work, maybe their top customers would be in 400-mile radius, or maybe 4,000-mile radius, right? Because people would have chosen to move away, right? So in that world, in that future, people would not give up on live content. People would definitely want to interact with people live, and the serendipity and the excitement of attending an event, that would still be something that people would want to do, right? And how can we make it more efficient? How can we make it more lifelike? So those were some of those fundamental things that we were betting on. And quite frankly, we were actually just taking baby steps, right? And it was just the confidence of our customers, right? The early adopters and people who just gave rave reviews about our experience on Twitter, that gave us more and more confidence to continue to pursue.
Okay. And on a more macro level, since you've done a lot of research on this, I want to ask your opinion on it. You mentioned earlier with Common Floor how you had trouble. Well, you may have had trouble attracting talent because someone, couldn't make it to the office from where they lived or whatever. And now you just went over how that's, remote work is sort of fixing, or is a potential, fix to that problem. But I wonder about how you think about like all the things that were important about bringing people into the office, for example, collaboration and culture and, contemporaneous sort of meetings like, oh, I got a great idea, that kind of thing, versus the remote sort of being a little bit different structure where you can see people versus video, and you can see what work they're doing and all, but you're not, engaging with them the same way you would if they were sitting next to you or in the office down the hall or whatever. And I think you have a unique perspective on this, so I'd like to know what it is.
Yeah. So absolutely not discounting the the benefits of being in office, being, having a shared space and that entire environment, which could be made a lot more conducive for productivity. And uh, what an office essentially guarantees is that there is an assurance of time, right? If 20 people in your team, they are at one location, you have an assurance of that time commitment. That is what it essentially guarantees. And then uh, being in the same space, there are social dynamics. There is, let's say, conversations which just spark out of serendipity, right? And things can just happen at that level, right? So we are used to all of that, absolutely, and that's why we miss all of that. But
Mm.
what usually happens in transitions, right? When let's say when there is a paradigm shift happening, right? There is usually one very big factor which is driving that paradigm shift, right? And after let's say some after the dust settles, or after, let's say, some stability is achieved, what we have seen is that, I'm just talking about in general, whenever there has been a paradigm shift, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
There are systems which emerge in the new paradigm, which sort of address all your needs, which were addressed in the previous paradigm in different forms, right? So the need for serendipity, the need for collaboration, the need for social bonding with colleagues, etc., those would definitely be addressed, but in new solutions. There will be new solutions for all of that, right? So, but this paradigm shift will absolutely happen without a doubt, because there is this very strong cost factor which is driving that paradigm shift.
Okay, I got. Yeah, that was really good. So new paradigm, new solutions. So in other words, you're saying whatever problems develop, and there will be problems that develop that maybe you wouldn't see in an office space. There'll be solutions developed for those, because the stakes are high, and you have to make sure that people stay engaged, like what they're doing, and all. So you'll figure it out. Basically, the world will figure it out as things come along.
Entrepreneurs and startups will figure it out. Yeah, they will create solutions wherever there is a need, there's an opportunity to build a product, build a company, right?
So let's start talking about how Airmeet got off the ground, Lalit. So you're having these conversations with your two co-founders. You recognize that there's an opportunity for something that's not being served well at the moment. There's a lot of work to do to get this thing off the ground. How did you get it started?
Yeah. So I think the first step was to get some more validation, right? So what we did was, at least for 2-3 weeks, while we were conducting a lot of these meetups on meeting solutions and webinars, just to understand the problem and friction a lot more, we did create an ideal product, right? What would an ideal product look like, in very bare bone, low fidelity, like a mock-up of sorts, right? And we did show it to folks who like us, right? That if this meetup that you just attended, if this was on such a software, right, or such an app, would that be great? And just getting responses and reactions, and we validated that whatever solution that we're conceptualizing, that should be something that people find natural, find intuitive, and then so that the risk is about the solution and not about the discoverability or the design of the product, right? So we did that with that level of validation for the first few weeks. And then once we had a somewhat clear picture about what the product should be, we started developing, right? And we did have a few developers join us. Again, this was through network, folks who worked previously with me in my previous company, and they joined forces, and we started to build a prototype. And it was just 4 weeks, right? And I'm a person who believes in artificial deadlines, right? So I did go and announce, a public event that will happen on Airmeet. It was not a very big scale event, but there was this very controversial book that has got launched in the Indian startup ecosystem, and I just got in touch with the author of that book, and convinced him to do a fireside chat on my platform, which was not even ready yet. And I announced the date that this is when it is going to happen, and then my team. Quite luckily, just put all the energies together. It was a very small team, just 5-people team, and then we worked through like weekends and late nights, and then we got the initial version out, and the first event was conducted. In just 5 to 6 weeks, we built this alpha version of the product, and that is how we actually got this out, right? And then then we started learning from them, right? When people actually came onto that product, what was the interaction, what was their experience like, right? And after every public event, right, there was at least 4 or 5 people who would come on Twitter and talk about how great this was. People did call out that this is the future of conferences. We never say that this is the future of conferences, but then it's our happy customer, happy attendees, or people who attended an Airmeet this in 2019 November, December. They came out of Twitter and said that this is the future of conferences, right? So that gave us the confidence. And then I think my investors from my previous company, I got in touch with them and then raised a small series, series A. Sorry, I raised a seed round, early 2020, and then since then we hired more people, built the version of the product that we built out just in alpha, put more energy inside of, on it, and then made a more stable product, and then learn from the customers, learned a hell lot about the event industry as such, right? Because I do not come from the event industry. I definitely have an experience as an attendee, but then the mindset of the person who's organizing an event, especially big event, right? A meetup is something which anybody can organize, right? And we keep organizing house parties and meetups in our own capacities, right? But then to be able to pull up a conference, a major conference, that's a totally different persona, right? So we got in touch with that persona through our, as in, they were some of our active users, and got to know that events are positioned very differently, right? A meetup has a very low convening power. A conference has a very high convening power, right? And those are two different platforms. Speakers, look at these two events differently. Some speakers would not even come for a meetup, or they would come only if the meetup is organized by someone with a very high prominence, right? So, and then what does it take to make a conference successful, right? The stakes are very high there, right? And why do people have parallel tracks, right? And again, approaching everything from a very fundamental lens, right? Would it make sense in the virtual world or not, right? Because why would people sit through 8 to 10 hours in front of a screen, right, for a virtual event? Even if it is a virtual event, why should it be 8 hours in a stretch, right? Why can't it be spread over, let's say, 7 days, maybe 1 hour each, right? So those are some fundamental questions we were asking, and also encouraging our customers to think about. But I think 2020 was such a drastic shift, right? It was in my Airmeet customers have articulated, that phase was a dumb digitization, right? People just wanted to get digitized and they did not think it through, right? So people were conducting like 8-hour long conferences. The framework and format of the conferences did not change. It was just tracks and everything that used to happen physically. They expected all of that to happen on virtually, right? That doesn't make sense, right? The virtual is a fundamentally different platform. So now what we are seeing is that people are a lot more receptive about the innovations that Airmeet has done. Now Airmeet has brought about a new thinking in the virtual events, right? And after the entire pandemic, we are now seeing customers who chose another software or another software which was built on a previous framework. Now they are appreciating what Airmeet is doing, and now our actual growth is, especially in the high value customer segment, our growth is now picking up since January.
So you said that users were the ones who were saying that Airmeet is the future of video conferencing. You weren't saying that. What were you saying? What were you saying to people to get them to come to this fireside chat in the beginning or whatever?
Yeah. So people were saying this is the future of conferences. Video conferencing, conferences, the physical conferences that we go to, right? People were saying that this is the future of video conferences. But when I was positioning the product back in time, I was calling it as an online video meetup. This is a video meetup. You will have a webinar with social interactions, right? You can actually have lifelike social interactions that you have at a physical webinar, because we have created the product as a space. You don't just enter a live session, you're entering a space, and then you can move from one video room to the other room. It's also the whole user experience is also very intuitive, right? It sort of presents you a top-down view of a virtual ballroom, right? A virtual banquet or a ballroom where you have tables, and every table can have a specific label, right? For example, let's say if your audience, if you are conducting a virtual meetup, I'm sure you have a lot of audience, right? Large audience for your podcast. You might want to just have a virtual meet and greet with your audience, right? So on Airmeet, you can actually label a virtual table as, let's say, if you know subsegments of your audience, right? So you can maybe choose to give a location as a way to come together, or let's say an interest as a way to come together, right? And you can label that video room, and people can just, when they join that room, they find themselves, in a video call with other folks, and they can easily switch out and go to any other video call, right? So that degree of freedom that we offer to the participant, that is something that is, that was unique at the time, and still happens to be unique the way we represent it. And it's very engaging. From the moment someone lands on an Airmeet, they instantly get engaged. They start looking at, okay, X person is online, and Y person is available on this table, he's discussing with Z person, and let me join, right? Very engaging.
Okay. So when I hear you say that, I think a couple of things come to mind. First, it's almost like augmented reality without augmented reality. So being put into these different rooms and stuff. I've been involved in some, things where you wear the Oculus glasses and it's like spatial web or something where you're, and obviously you don't have to do that to be on Airmeet, but it sounds like you're incorporating some of that part of the experience into it. Am I on the right track there?
Absolutely, you're absolutely bang on the right track. And let me also, share something about something, slightly non-conventional, right? So according to me, at least in 2021, the age where we live in, right? There's too much content. You name any speaker, you can already find a lot of YouTube videos and podcasts from that person. Then why is it that we still get attracted to that new event that is happening, right? So why would still people crowd to listen to Elon Musk? Why would people still aggregate to listen to, let's say, a novel Ravikant, right? Because there is a non-fungible value to the presence of the person as well, right? So Elon's content and knowledge is valuable, but Elon's presence is also very valuable, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so we have been, in the previous industrial revolutions, we have been able to successfully replicate products, right? So we could replicate an iPhone into millions of iPhones, and everybody could get their own iPhone, right? But we cannot do that with a person. We cannot, let's say, replicate Mike, right? And so Mike is one non-fungible entity in the universe, and your presence can only be scaled, cannot be replicated, right? And your presence is of value. So today, technologies like Airmeet are basically building for the presence economy of sorts, right? So what essentially happens at an event is that I'm able to attract someone's presence, and that is enough to attract presence of an audience, and then I can unlock the value of the whole aggregation to, let's say, sponsors, and maybe other connections can happen with the presence of other people at an event, right? So it's in some sense it's the presence economy of sorts. There are multiple currencies getting exchanged. Some people are exchanging social capital, some people are exchanging actual money, some people are exchanging it for demand generation. But then this is a very nascent stage of the presence economy, right? And we are actually building and organizing that.
So help us understand the difference. Say we're used to, I'm trying to think of how many conferences I've been to that were all web, and I think the ones that I have been to have been sort of like what you described. They're essentially the conference the way it always was, but you're sitting there watching it for 8 hours or whatever, as you said. They may have breakout rooms, for example. They'll put you together with a couple other people, and there's a topic, or that's the networking, or whatever. What's compare that what I think most people are used to what an Airmeet experience is like, Lalit. So we have a real good understanding of we should check this out.
Sure. So Airmeet is the perfect mix of informal and formal flavors to your event, right? So the formal flavor to your event is when all your programmed content or programmed activities happen, and the informal bit is when the participants also have a degree of freedom to create their own conversations, so jump into conversations that they like, right? And so that is what in nutshell is the uniqueness of Airmeet is, right? We offer a much higher degree of movement and degree of participation to the attendee themselves. So, and that's why attendees love Airmeet.
Okay, and without the meeting organizer needing to be involved, for example.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, because I'm thinking about like Zoom, if you're not the meeting organizer, you can chat with somebody if they let you see everybody else, but it's just typing. It's not, you can't talk to somebody on your own. So Airmeet allows you to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Huh. And this social lounge thing, is that what I read about this social lounge feature? Is that sort of beginning thing where you were talking about, looking at a blank screen or a static screen versus, and having an experience while you're waiting for the meeting to happen or something? Or is it something different? Okay.
So social lounge is where you have to wait for the webinar to start, and that is where you can take a seat and then become available for other people to come and join and have a conversation, right? So that was our minimal viable product to bring about a networking experience in place of a waiting experience, right? And the way we have designed it, it's like a top-down view of a banquet hall where there are tables where you can actually move and sit on a table and then move to another table.
Okay. Okay. The other thing that I don't know if I was going to ask you about Clubhouse, but after you explained it a little further, maybe that's not a good one. But I guess what I'm wondering is what kinds of events can take place well on Airmeet. Like, what are you really targeting? Because I saw that, like I mentioned some of the things that I've seen, but I've also been to like charity events where they have auctions and they have, other components to it, and they're using different software platforms to do that in conjunction with a production company, to set up the event itself. Is that something that you're targeting in addition to conferences, or is there a sort of a band around which you think Airmeet is the best solution?
Sure. So let me give you the customer perspective here, right? Because almost every organization does a variety of events on their own, right? So, right. But the customer that we are building for at the moment, right, is basically an organization where the members of that organization already have some bit of a familiarity, right? It's not that absolutely new people are meeting each other. So
Okay.
there is a lot of person of interest based communication that I want to catch up with Mike, so I will join where Mike is, right? And I can actually catch up with Mike, and then Mike and I can go and have our own conversation on a different table, right? So that familiarity has to be there, and that's why our associations love our product, right? So large associations have just brought in a lot of their events on Airmeet, and they continue to grow their usage, right? And we are actually so we have two formats, right? So one is a simple gathering format where you can actually have an informal gathering and have a few fireside chat sessions. And then second format is basically like a full-fledged conference or an expo, right? So this gives associations like a tool set for an year-long engagement, right? So they can have almost like a monthly impromptu gathering as along with, let's say, quarterly semi-formal gatherings and then annual mega gala gatherings, right? So we are giving them this year-long engagement solution. And as I said, right, the customer that we are building for right now is already having high degree of familiarity between their members.
Okay, got it. And how does someone start a relationship with Airmeet? What's the process to get started?
Yeah, so it's a fully self-serve product where anybody can go to airmeet.com, just get started. We have a free forever plan where you could do events up to 100 people. You get our core product absolutely free. There are a lot of bells and whistles which are not in the free plan, but then many communities, especially many student communities and many, I would say, not-for-profit communities, if they've started using our product in the free plan, they continue to use it, right? 100 people is a good enough number. And when you do when you do a session there, you can also easily live stream your session on your social media channels, etc. So it's easy to get started, self-serve, and then at various points in the product journey, you get to book a sort of a appointment with a product specialist. If you want to understand something, if you have a question in mind. We also have a 24/7 open support lounge, right? So there's actually a physical space that we have created using our own product, where all our customers are always welcome, and they will always find at least 4 or 5 people from my team who are, available to do any troubleshooting, to address any question. You go to that 24/7 support lounge. The link is on our footer, and you can see that there are tables, and my team is sitting on those tables, and you can just join any of these tables, have a chat with a Airmeet employee, and explain to them your question or a problem, and they will solve it then and there.
A real person.
A real person, yeah. So it's like
A real
an in-store service, kind of a virtual in-store service experience is what we are providing.
So you mentioned early on, I think, that you're, doing 4,000 events a month. Did I remember that correctly?
Yep.
And you start late 2019. You get the sort of the seed round of, which I think was about $3 million, if I read it correctly, from people who had invested with you before in your previous company. That happens in just when, March or so, just when the world is kind of waking up to this COVID-19 awareness. And then later in the year, you managed to raise a much bigger Series A round, a lot of money.
And
Yep.
So what's got people so excited about it? How did you and I think the ramp from like the first fireside chat to 4,000 events a month, a year, not even a year and a half later, has largely been driven by word of mouth or referrals, right? I mean, it hasn't been the big advertising campaign or anything. So you're getting a tremendous amount of traction from, regular people telling other regular people about it, and then you're also attracting, Sequoia India in this case, for your Series A. That's serious money from a serious firm. So, what's happening? Why is that? How is that happening?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, right? So, Mike, events, people haven't really looked at events, critically, right? Events have always existed, and we've all gone comfortable with the way events were happening, right? Because it was big economy driver, right? A lot of money was going into events, and people who were doing events, they had the budgets to do events, right? So nobody had nobody had the need to even relook at whether are events really efficient, right? So, but if you critically analyze events, they are big value movers, right? People bring their presence to an event, and because of that presence, a lot of value gets unlocked, right? Sometimes it's a new job offer, sometimes it's a new $1 million deal or investments offers, right? So very, very big value movers, these events are, right? But the unfortunate part was that 85% of the expenditure in the entire economy was material expenditure, right? So things like paying for the venue, paying for electricity, paying for security, paying for tea, coffee, tissues, right? All of that, right? And that used to make events inaccessible to the upstarts, right? To the pioneer who is innovating on, let's say, climate change, or someone who has such a great idea that he wants to catalyze to the world, right? For all those folks, events became inaccessible, and then they would be dependent upon, let's say, information middlemen of sorts, right? Who would organize conferences, who are big conferences, and again, they would end up just taking a lot more time to reach a larger audience, right? So what has now happened is that the world has experienced that digital events, the way the way these products have been built, are equally and many times more effective than physical events, right? Because in a physical event, there is a lot of physical constraints, like constraints about participation, constraint about time and space. You could only rent it for 8 hours, and you could only do, let's say, 6 sessions, right? And you could only fill 400 people, right? A lot of these constraints, right? Far off people could not join, and again, cost was again a constraint, right? So and again, the amount of connections, if you may recollect, one of your previous physical event experience, I'm sure you would have also gone through some awkward experiences where, some conversations you were just sitting through, you did not really enjoy those conversations. You just wanted to, teleport yourself out to something interesting that was happening, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
digital allows you to do that. You can just move in an instant from a boring conversation to something super exciting, right? The relevance of the people that you meet digitally could be a lot higher, right? And we can, through digital channels, we can bring a lot more context to that conversation, right? So, for example, through digital, like there is more than enough information about every person on digital mediums already, right? So if through a very well connected, very well integrated experience, I can get to know that the person that I'm talking to is let's say is an MIT alumni. He plays golf. He's an ex-Oracle, and then I can actually have a lot better conversations. I can actually have a lot more deeper conversations to connect with that person, right? And all of that is not possible in the physical world, right? So what we have experienced is that digital events are a lot more effective than physical events in terms of the clear ROI, right? Definitely on the sensory aspects of things, and to a large extent, the human to human elongated conversations are not there, right? But then the right level of conversations, the right the, I would say, effective conversations, those are happening in a much better fashion. So those are fundamental indicators of something like a permanent shift, right? So for example, you would not go back to buying a car if you're so used to Uber, right? Or you wouldn't go back to, let's say, cooking every meal in your home if you're so used to, like calling, let's say, I'm not sure what,
Postmates
in India we have so many, yeah. So I think so. So these are indicators towards an irreversible behavior change, right? And especially there are younger customer segments, and as well as younger companies and organizations, which are so excited about this because it's some sort of a force multiplier for them. At a fraction of a cost or even lesser, they can actually reach a much wider audience, right? So this is again a digital transformation of a very old industry, and this happens to be a very large industry, like $1 trillion industry, right? That is what is getting excited. Like all the investors are excited because of this reason.
You brought up a lot of great points there. The one I hadn't thought of, and you didn't actually say this, but I thought of it. If I were to sign up for a conference normally, or I was thinking about it, and I'd look at the time, and I was thinking to myself, oh, I've got a meeting for 1 hour of that day, so I can't go. But when it's a digital, I can be like, okay, well, I can go to 7/8 of it. I'm going to miss 1/8 of it, but that's fine because it actually allowed my schedule to work with the conference's schedule, as opposed to it either being an either or an if then. I hadn't really thought about that, but that's really smart. Plus the ROI for the conference is, I mean, you did a great job of explaining that. And I've seen this in my own experience. We're doing virtual or digital events now, and they're charging 75 or 80% of what they normally would charge for you to come, which I think you mentioned the ROI. I think that makes the conference more profitable because all of those expenses that you mentioned, or a lot of them, you still need production and stuff, I suppose, to put on a good event, but union wages and all the other stuff that come, especially with big conference spaces, there are all kinds of restrictions and costs. You got rid of it. And I think I saw you somewhere where you said, or it was attributed to you, that what you're doing is democratizing access to live events, and I loved that thought because that's what it is. I mean, if you want to go to a live event anywhere, you can probably figure out a way to do it through Airmeet or some of the other options that are out there, where before it was just like that, there's no way I could ever do that. So congratulations on that. Well, Lalit, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I'll give you the last word. If there's anything that I haven't asked that you'd like to share, or anything else about Airmeet or you, or connecting with you, feel free.
Yep. So just maybe, I would like to say that customers, right, our customers are propellers of progress and catalyst of opportunities in their own respective domains, right? They are the ones which are pushing the boundaries of progress, right? And we are super excited to be empowering them, right? And in our own way, we are also propelling the progress of humanity, right? So we are very excited about what we are building on Airmeet, and every single day is a great day to be contributing to it.
Well, well, it sure seems that way, and congratulations on your progress so far. If you're looking out into a couple years into the future, what does Airmeet look like to you right now?
So a couple of years into the future, I think, as I said, right, so we are at the very nascent stage of something that I call as a presence economy. I think we and companies like us are building for that, right? So this will become some sort of an infrastructure for that presence economy, where you don't really have to be physically present, and still a lot of value could be unlocked for you, right? That is what we will be building, the infrastructure and tools for the presence economy.
Nice. Well, I look forward to keeping track of your progress. You're definitely well on your way. So congratulations, and thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thanks a lot, Mike. It was great to have a chat.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the How Did Happen podcast, where we believe that success doesn't happen unless you make it happen. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. And while you're there, please rate it and leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the show, ideas for future guests, or whatever you'd like to share. And of course, you can always find me at mikemalatesta.com. See you next time. Thanks again for listening to the How Did Happen podcast.